Hello and welcome back for another exciting episode of the Business Post Connected podcast. I'm joined again in the studio by Alice O'Leary, one of our regular newsroom reporters. Hi Alice, how are you doing?
Good, Charlie, how are you?
I'm all good, thank you. Excited to get back down to things after the bank holiday weekend. And we are starting off something that has just happened, is the EU AI Act has come into force. Tell us a bit about that, because obviously it feels as though it's been with us for a long, long time.
Indeed, yeah. So it's kind of a big weekend in that respect, Charlie, becoming active and enforceable, as you say. So I suppose the EU, they have now a host of kind of new powers, as it were, to inspect AI models. They restrict EU market access and they can slap providers with multi-million euro fines. So like the big AI giants as we know, Anthropic and OpenAI, they're all included in this as well. So they're going to face that kind of increased kind of scrutiny. And I suppose, in a way, I suppose it raises the stakes for those US big tech companies, because there's this kind of constant, it seems anyway, increase of scrutiny and a really closely watched eye to try and enforce AI.
Yeah, this is the first time, just to go back on this, it entered into force on August the 1st, 2024, so 2 years ago. But this is the first time that the EU can enforce actions under it, which is, just to cover the main sort of things, it rules out things like social scoring by governments, subliminal or manipulative behavior modification, real-time biometric identification in public spaces, and untargeted scraping of facial images from the internet or CCTV. So there's a lot of really, unacceptable risk those ones are under. And then there's transparency risks and, minimal risk, deep fakes, all of this stuff that are suddenly coming in under this. And this is, as I said, the first time that this is enforceable, that the EU can take action under this. It does kind of, I suppose the timing is perhaps unfortunate in the way of, as you say, the Trump administration is ramping up its criticism of the EU at this time with big fines against Google and so on. Yeah. This is probably not going to go well if there's suddenly big actions coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. And another big story as well on, speaking of AI, on AI gigafactories, which is a very tech-heavy term, but the EU has basically invited companies to apply to build as many as 7 AI data centres in Europe, backed by public funds. So that's kind of helping the bloc in its plan to cut reliance on overseas technology, such as imports from the likes of Silicon Valley and Asia and whatnot. So these AI gigafactories, as they're called, will receive €10 billion from the EU and its member states. And it says here approximately twice as much in private investment, according to the European Commission. So it's an interesting one. Like, the EU has pitched this as a way of AI sovereignty, but can we, I suppose, realistically compete with those big shots in likes of the US and China?
Yeah, well, there's a big need for this, because there was recent stats that come out that said something like 80% of organizations in the EU are dependent on the big 3 cloud providers, which is, obviously Amazon, AWS, Microsoft Azure and Google, and, so that's the cloud, just alone at something like 80%. So if they were gone, we would, the economy as we know it, I think, would probably collapse, because everything is in the cloud now, right? So and it does coincide with this push towards more, sovereignty, tech sovereignty in the EU. So, it's, I think it's going to be something that's going to be welcome. 10 billion is, they will receive 10 billion from the EU and its member states, and approximately twice as much, they say, as that in European investment. And that remains to be seen. This is still very small fry compared to what's going on. It sounds very big, but it's not. And also what sounds very big is that Ireland itself is to invest 10 million to procure compute access time from an AI gigafactory in France. We're teaming up basically with France to kind of do this as part of that, which, all of this is, I would say, a positive. But as I say, we've such a huge dependency on US tech. The move towards better, greater sovereignty is going to take a long, long time, and this is only a starting point in that, I think. But nonetheless, good to see something happening on that front.
Exactly. We were chatting last week, Charlie, that there's been a kind of a slew of recent big tech earnings, and that's only kept going. So the big shots, Amazon and Apple, were the ones in the hot seat last week.
Yeah.
Just to give you a bit of an overview, so Amazon reported second quarter revenue of $200 billion, up 20%, and AWS outperformed. They were really happy with that. The chief executive, Andy Jassy, called it AWS's fastest growth in 18 quarters, which is great. So the company said it expects to spend about $200 billion on capital projects this year, mostly obviously in AI, again kind of continuing the trend that we've seen last week. AI investment is kind of what's being very closely watched by investors. And then on the other end of the scale, if you like, Apple investors didn't seem happy originally, even though it was quite strong results. They had a 16% rise in revenues, Apple did, but shares slipped. And as you were kind of saying, this is mainly probably down to supply chain issues as well.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, they've marked that, chip prices are starting to bite. There's, interestingly enough, Apple has just teamed up with Klarna for a package where you can kind of basically rent your laptop or phone or whatever, and I think that's directly because of what's going on. Of like chip prices are rising, so the cost of goods, the MacBook Airs that I have here and so on, they are going to be going up in price. One thing now is, will you rent and then give it back at the end of the period and get a new one? I think that's going to come more into play. The link up with Klarna is a good example of them kind of going, there's an issue coming our way. We need to do this. And I think, as you say, Apple shares sunk after they released their results. But I think that is more a case because of the chip prices more than anything else. AWS, I think, was incredibly interesting to see because, they shot up. They joined the roster now of companies that have surpassed $3 trillion in value on the back of their results. And it was really strong results, particularly, huge growth in Microsoft, sorry, in AWS, in the cloud business, which is, related to AI. And as we said before last week, and as I've written about a number of times, we're very much in that place where we're seeing, people want to see AI, if there's investments going on in AI, that they have a result.
Yeah.
What I thought was really interesting about this is that Amazon's own efforts in terms of AI have been weaker than many others. I think critics would safely say, but I mean, as Andy Jassy said the other day when he was talking about their latest results, it's like, most organizations are going to be using, if not already using, a mixture of different models. And so it doesn't matter if they have the best model, as long as they have one that's in the mix, or it almost seemed to be what he was saying, which is like, okay, and I think in a way that kind of safeguards what they're doing, because you've got Meta, you've got Google, to a lesser extent you've got Microsoft, but they are plowing gazillions into their AI efforts, and they're kind of going, well, Amazon's not spending quite as much, but is kind of getting good results nonetheless, even with a sort of adequate model rather than the top of the range one. And I think the same applies to Apple was very late in terms of AI. Its spend is considerably less than others. Mm-hmm. It's been seen as behind, but in a way that may come into play of benefit in it because it will use other models that are already there. It has a relationship with OpenAI in particular, and that could come into effect and help it in a way because it hasn't committed these gazillions in money. So, being late to the party may actually save them, and likewise being a runner-up rather than a leader, as Amazon arguably is in AI, may work out to its benefit.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Klarna collaboration as well, as you say, kind of almost satiating consumers, because as you mentioned, the fact that the price of a MacBook has gone up, or even availability for some configurations, consumers will wait until the end of September. And I think it's almost that kind of, people don't really care as much when it doesn't affect the items that they want. Maybe it used to affect, like, let's say the Mac Mini or kind of other niche products, but now that it's affecting the MacBook Air. But it's a very good point. So I think it's an interesting one on the back of, as I said, that we've seen a host of really, really expensive and big capital investments in AI from the big major Meta, Microsoft. Yeah. It's an interesting kind of take on the fact of how Apple is doing or Amazon as well.
And it's interesting because, I think in particular for Google and Meta, they're in that situation where if they stop spending as much, the market's going to then question their whole strategy, as it is doing anyway, and kind of going, well, hold on, you said you've bet the farm on this and now you're suddenly rolling back. It feels like they're sort of caught in this now. They have to continue and they have to make it work, which is really hard work. Whereas Amazon's kind of going, yeah, we're investing, we're doing this, and yeah, we're maybe not as, in the lead as everyone else, but we're doing okay, actually. Thank you very much. And
they're doing absolutely fine.
That's kind of not a bad position to be in at all, And likewise for Apple, it's, it has been late to the party, particularly in terms of its phones. Samsung and Google's Pixel are way ahead in terms of AI, but that may not be as damaging as it once seemed it would be. So, yeah, it's interesting to see how things are developing. But, it goes back to that thing of investors very much want to see results, or, they are paying much closer attention to what's going on in terms of where that spend's going and what's happening as a result of it. Now, I'm joined by Rosanne Longmore, Chief Executive of Coroflo. Coroflo has just gone to market with what is described as the world's first accurate breastfeeding monitor. Rosanne, welcome to the studio. Great to have you here, and congratulations on getting your device on the shelves. That might not sound like a major thing for someone that works in fast-moving consumer goods or whatever, but for someone that works in medtech, it's been quite the journey to get to this stage. Am I right?
Yeah, no, it's a huge achievement, and we're incredibly proud to be the first and only accurate breast milk monitor on the market. But it has been no mean feat. I think, you mentioned earlier, Charlie, that you met us 6 or 7 weeks into the journey back in 2017, and I think it's fair to say, like all startups, it's taken 3 times longer, and it's 3 times harder and 3 times more expensive than we ever anticipated, but we're thrilled to be here today.
And tell us about the device, I suppose, how it came to be, how you had the idea for it, and I suppose the journey that is, why has it taken this long to get to market?
Okay, well, my 2 co-founders are Jamie and Helen. Helen is a medical doctor and Jamie's an engineer. And when their first baby was born, he was absolutely tiny. And Helen had the experience of the public health nurse coming out and weighing the baby. She would breastfeed the baby, weigh the baby. And this is a bit of a nonsense in a domestic environment. Pre and post feed weighing has accuracy in a highly protocolized medical setting where it's emotion compensated, high precision scales, and the baby is swaddled, etc. But for women at home, there is no product that existed. Jamie was actually working in the area of microflow technology and was looking to see why this product did not exist. And he could see that really the technology race was around the silicone nipple shields. So silicone nipple shields are as thin as a contact lens, and they're about €10 in every pharmacy, and they're currently worn for skin protection or for indications such as inverted nipples or oversupply. So 98% of medical professionals have no problem recommending them. So the technology to get a flow meter into this already existing acceptable form, which is as thin as a contact lens, was the holy grail, really, out of this medical science, achievement. And Jamie spent 2 years developing the patent, and when the patent granted, we knew we had something, and that's when we quit our jobs in 2017 and started the company.
And you worked at Davy before, didn't you?
I was in Davy. I'm Jamie's cousin.
Yeah.
So my cousin is Jamie, the co-founder, and his wife. So I was in Davy. My background is in finance and project management. And I just wanted to build this with them. So, when we started the journey, it was very organic, but we did realise very quickly within weeks that investors were really, really compelled by the team, like having the different areas of expertise. So Helen is our Chief Research Officer, and she leads up all of our academic and clinical studies. Jamie is the CTO, and he is in, the software and engineering and biomedical engineering teams. And then my side is the CEO of strategy and finance. So it happened quite organically, but in fact, it has been a really good way to build a team.
And you touched on there about when I would have first covered Coroflo, and that would have been just a few weeks of you starting, and there was a Virgin competition. Yeah. Richard Branson very much took a shine to the product and to you.
Yeah, we won that like 6 weeks into our existence. We really just at that point had our patent on a piece of paper, and we're fundraising to bring that patent to a working prototype. Meeting Richard Branson back then was fantastic. Like, he was launching his book with the Losing My Virginity or one of those, and he were mentioned in that, and he was doing a lot of podcasts and a lot of arena tours around the UK, and he continually mentioned this, if we can see what this data looks like, if we can help women breastfeed for longer, what does that look like for global health population outcomes? What does that do for infant and maternal health? So that whole longevity piece, like, he really backed. And then subsequently, 2 years ago, I met him again, and completely by accident. And I couldn't wait to show him the finished product. Fantastic. Compared to the prototype I showed him at the time. Like, it's laughable. But so that's always been a great support for us.
Lovely. And tell us then about the journey to get it to here now where it is on the shelves. It's in Tony Keeley's, isn't it? Is it
Tony
Keeley's?
Keeley's?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tony Keeley's. I
Yeah.
remember going in there. You know,
Yeah.
every parent would know it from going in there, buying the pram, you know, in the car seat when they're first, have a child. You know, so where else would you want it to be? But I mean, that's the first place it's going. It's also going to be. You've got a partnership with John Lewis.
That's right. So in Ireland, it's Tony Keeley's and Macaulay's pharmacies.
Fantastic.
And then in the UK, we'll go in through John Lewis. So again, a baby destination store, and just where the nursery advisors really have that time to talk to the parents and educate them about, you know, the use, who it's for, why you would buy it. And really, because it's such a novel product, that education and awareness is so important. You know, at the moment, we don't have any competitors, only breastfeeding versus formula. So really, it's so novel in the technology that there is a huge investment required around education and awareness. So they are best placed to do that. So basically, in 2017, we had the patent, we left our jobs, we raised a seed round. We got a working prototype, and then we decided we were at a juncture in our business where we could launch to the market, but we could never call ourselves the first and only accurate breast milk monitor in the world, because, you know, to do that, we would need to be compared against the existing gold standard in science and medicine, which was the highly protocolized medical setting weighing. So we went to the European Commission, and they funded us €2.5 million of public money to do a clinical study. And that took 4 years over COVID. So again, something we never anticipated COVID happening. And at that point, we could achieve our technical validation at the end of that. So Europe backed us all the way. Again, where VCs, nobody wanted to take that risk. The European Commission backed us, and they said, look, this is a product that's good for babies, mothers and society, and if we can help women in Europe get to the 6-month breastfeeding target, what does that look like for European health population outcomes? So that brought us to 2023, and then at that phase 2 was, okay, now we have a working technology, first in the world, took 6 years. Now, can we manufacture this product at scale? So Coro is an exceptionally complex product to assemble. You're talking about component parts in something as thin as a contact lens. I believe we're the first company in the world to overmold onto soft cable, and that is why we won the Red Dot for design engineering.
Yeah, I should say that was one of a number of prizes you've won. You were in Silicon Valley. I can't remember the name of the CES, of course. The massive global consumer focused, consumer tech focused awards show earlier this year, and you cleaned up there pretty much.
Yeah, we're the only product at CES history to take all 5 awards. So, you know, we were there with the biggest companies in the world, whether it be the Whoops and Oura Rings and Dysons, and they have never received 2 awards. We took all 5 across the CES with an $800 startup stand. So that was us unveiling the technology to the public in the United States. The demand for this product in the United States is absolutely huge. So where we are now at the point is we now have manufacturing, signed off our production line, and now we need to replicate those lines to meet the demand of the US market. So our trajectory now is Ireland, UK next month, and then into Europe in Q1, and then into the US in September 27. So we have a very clear pathway in commercialization, but you know, this is not a demand problem. This is now a supply problem. Can we make it quick enough to meet the demands of each market?
And can you?
Yes, I believe we can. This isn't going to be the thing that stops us. I mean, Coro has been even the material science around the regulatory framework, the safety around it. This has been, I think, like putting something into a newborn baby's mouth, one of the hardest products that could ever be, made, I believe. So it's been a massive feat of engineering and science across every piece of it. So the sales and marketing is but it's execution risk. Yeah. And it is, we have a fantastic team there where they're absolutely best placed to do this. They all have American consumer product experience, D2C experience, and into that retail market. So, no, we can do this 100%. Yeah, like this is the exciting part for us now.
Yeah, and I imagine, the excitement as well for people who can buy this, because I remember, when we brought our daughter home first, and, that fear of like, oh my God, is she getting enough milk? Is everything okay? And that nervousness around it, to be able to have something that makes you kind of go, it's okay, we know, or she's not getting enough. Okay, then we can talk to the doctors around it, and we can, figure this out. is like, that's an incredible proposition that you are bringing, in terms of, I suppose, even the confidence that young parents have now, with this. But I guess as well, I mean, what's it like for you to then kind of see it now on shelves and kind of go, it's been a journey for you guys?
Yeah, so today in Tony Keeley's was our first event, and that was the first time I saw the in-store, presentation of it, and it was amazing. It was so exciting. And next week down in Macaulay's in Douglas. So like the excitement even from the retailers, like they just are incredibly excited to sell this. They say the amount of mothers that come in and say, I don't know if the baby's getting enough milk. So what we want to do is support women, no matter what choice they make in feeding in their journey, like really just to give accurate information to women who want it and need it, with the caveat that this is not going to be for every woman. Sure. If a woman's breastfeeding naturally and the baby's gaining weight, fine. But for the women who want or need accurate data, now is accessible for them. And no, I mean, this is hugely exciting. The team are we're all working flat out, but it's happy busy.
Excellent. And just one thing, because we touched on you touched on it when in talking earlier, and I know we've interviewed you on it a number of times. I mean, as we all know, hardware is hard, as the famous saying is. VCs tend to kind of go, oh my God, hardware, don't want to go near it, because it is a long-term investment. It's going to take a long time before you start seeing your return on it. But there's also that other aspect as well. VCs don't seem to like to back women entrepreneurs, or also women's tech either, women's health tech. Could you tell us about how that impacted, I suppose, the growth of the company and your speed to market?
Yeah, like for me, I never felt I was turned down because I was a woman. Yeah. I certainly felt that because it was hardware. Like when we first went out to raise, it was all crypto, blockchain, tech bros, blah, blah, blah. Then, the next cycle was all AI, and we have no AI. And we go out and very clearly say, there is no AI in Coro. This is actual real liquid volume through a sensor. Now, when it comes time to build an AI model or do those projections, we will be the only company in the world that can accurately, inform an AI model or train an algorithm. So we've always stayed in our lane. But again, people like flashy things. They like new things. And software is quicker to the market. It's easier return on investment. But what I say to investors is when you build something in hardware and you have that long-term defensibility around your patent moat, you have patent defensibility, you can't copy. You can copy in software. So, investors tend to invest in what they know. So all of my initial investors, bar a handful, were all men. And so they were, I always felt we were in a position where it was a very clear proposition. It was a very clear product that we have no competitor in the world. They could walk into any store and know that there was nothing like it in the world. And that was easy for them to figure out. And the next thing was they could talk to their network, their daughters, their wives, their sisters, and immediately understand the size of the problem. And then finally, the business model is very straightforward. We make it for X, you sell it for Y. With all of the, software platforms, some of the business models were extremely complex. So it's really, for me, it's a big shout out to the Irish Angel Network. Coroflo has been built over 10 million with Irish private investors' money and 250,000 from Enterprise Ireland, which was amazing. But really on the back of Irish people, sophisticated, educated enough to go out and, take the opportunity to come with us. And unfortunately, the VCs just felt that, hardware was too hard, too long. I don't know why, but I really didn't get the impression it was because I was a woman. As I said, my pretty much 90% of my investors are men. So yeah, it's just a pity. I felt maybe there was quite an unsophisticated VC landscape. Yeah,
that's interesting to hear. And I suppose last question is, what next for Coroflo? I mean, I imagine, have you had approaches to acquire the company? Would you be interested in a sale? Are you like, you've got to this stage and you're like, well, let's ride this out, or, or all of the above?
All of the above.
I'm not telling you at all, Charlie.
No, all of the above. Yes, we've had offers to acquire the company. Yes, we are fundraising. We're doing another 5 million raise now, which is closing at the end of September. So again, privates only. And that will bring us through to Q1 next year, where we will do our first institutional fundraise with an international VC. probably between 30 and 50 million, and that will bring us to fund the US market next year. So this is our last opportunity for Irish investors to invest and private investors to participate. And yeah, great. Like it, out of the 5 million, 2.5 has been committed in a week. Fantastic. So, and again, really heavily backed by Enterprise Ireland. They have been the best investor for Coroflo, backed us from day one. And really, outside of the money, it's the supports they offer are just next level. Like I, as a solo CEO traveling around the world, I can go anywhere in Asia, America. I can ring up and somebody from Enterprise Ireland will be there. Like it's incredible, their reach. So yeah, we are doing another round. We want to continue building this company. Like sometimes I feel like the feat of engineering has been done, never achieved in the world. The execution piece is execution risk, but it has been done many times before. We just need to be disciplined and focused and do it correctly. And that's a really exciting proposition for us. And then separately and aside to our commercial aims, we work with global leading institutions, medical and academic researchers, so we can add to the global body of knowledge around breastfeeding science. So that's really important for us, that we're not just, it's not just our commercial aims, but we want to revolutionize breastfeeding so women can feel supported, whether they're formula feeding or breastfeeding, and really look at that kind of population level research. So again, we have so much going on with maternity hospitals and research organisations in the USA and across Europe. So that's a really big, meaty part of our work, is to continue that in parallel with the consumer. Fantastic.
Well, as I started off with by saying, congratulations on getting the product on the shelf. And, as you say, Keely's and Macaulay's in Ireland, and it will soon be available in John Lewis.
10th of August.
And I'm sure many other places as well in the future. So best of luck with all of that. And we'll talk again to you soon. Thanks so much for dropping in.
Thanks, Charlie.
Now, and we're back in the studio now. That was a great chat. I know you've spoken to Rosanne before as well. She's fantastic, isn't she?
She's fantastic, yeah, brilliant. She's really built an incredible company as well. And as you say, a long way to get there, but absolutely incredible. Yeah, and exciting to see what happens next. I think it's going to be a fantastic result for them. It's a company we very much love writing about, and seeing their success is fantastic. Now, finally, one last thing. What have you got for us this week? A very AI heavy week, I feel like, Charlie, but that's just the times we're living at the moment. Sam Altman, the chief executive of OpenAI, he's made the case for ChatGPT for parenting again. So it's something that he's seemingly backed before, and it's interesting in and of itself. But he posted last week that parents could connect their family calendars, explain your kids' interests, what he said, to the company's new product, ChatGPT Work. And then every morning for the drive to school, have it make a podcast that talks about one of the child's soccer game or their upcoming birthday or some news. I guess as an alternative, you could just talk to your child. That's exactly. You know what I mean? But, and that's exactly I'm old school like that. I'm very old fashioned, Actually, Alex Hirsch, he's the creator of Gravity Falls, an animated, and he literally said, what if you just talk to your children, ? And it just completely got so many more reposts and likes compared to his post. So you're on the exact same page, a lot of people. Very good. I think personally, it's one thing to kind of direct your listening away from actual podcasts or music and shift it to AI. Like that's quite, in a way, depressing enough as it is, but I think bringing your kids into the mix and integrating it so specifically into their calendars and personalised, it's something very dystopian to me personally, but I think it seems to be the case for a lot of people when they read this. Yeah, no, I have heard a lot of parents that are using AI maybe to kind of create bedtime stories and stuff like that, that involves the child and, perhaps things that happen during their day or something, and maybe that's kind of not so damaging. Yeah, it sounds kind of cute and cuddly, I suppose, when compared to the dystopian, don't bother talking to your children, ChatGPT will do it for you. But it's still like, you kind of go, yeah, I don't know about that at all, he's been, Altman, when he first talked about this, which is a while ago, was widely ridiculed for it. And I think that's pretty much the same thing, right? Yeah, exactly. Hopefully, our advice would be, for what it's worth, it's like, maybe just have a chat. Yeah, have a chat. Bring your child up yourself. Don't get ChatGPT to do it for you. Anyway. That's a very good mantra. That's brilliant. Right, we'll leave it there. We will be back next week, as always. Look forward to chatting then. See you soon. Bye.